In this video, I'll be showing you how to make a stock solution of potassium iodate. And what we're going to be using is the ChemCollective Virtual Lab. Here we see our workbench, and this surface right here, this gray box, is going to kind of act as our lab bench like we would have in a traditional chemistry laboratory. Along the side here, under Solutions, we have the various different chemicals that we'll be using for this lab. If I click on glassware, I can see a whole range of different types of glassware, and these can be then dragged over to the workbench to perform our work. There's also some tools like a scale, which we'll use in this step right here. So our first step is to just grab the solid potassium iodate. You can just click on it, and that brings it over onto the workbench. Here's some information about the potassium iodate, and you can see I can move it around on the work surface just like you would a traditional chemical in a regular lab. The other thing that I'm going to need is I'm going to need some other things from the stockroom. One thing I'm going to grab is I'm going to grab from tools a scale. We'll be using the scale to measure out our solid potassium iodate. The other thing that I'm going to need is some weigh paper. And this is found under Other in the weigh boat. That is the same thing as weigh paper. I can move that right here. So as you can see, when we're measuring out a chemical, the first thing that we're going to do is take our weigh paper or our weigh boat and place it on the scale. And you can see that weigh boat actually has some mass, so we don't want to include that when we're measuring out chemicals. So we'll tear the scale so that now we have no value being recorded. So it's been balanced out, it's at 0.0000. The next thing that we'll need to do is figure out how much of that potassium iodate we need to add to the scale to get us that concentration of 0.00200 moles per liter when we prepare the 100 milliliter solution. So let's say I needed 0.0500 grams of the potassium iodate. That's not the right value, but let's say I needed to measure that out. I'll drag this over to the scale, and what I'll do is add that mass onto the scale using the precise value, and I'm going to go pour. And if we do this, we can see the scale is now reading 0.0500 grams. That's perfect. Once I'm done adding my chemical, I'm going to just click on X, and I'm good to go. I'll move this out of the way because I'm not going to need this right now, and I'll disconnect the weigh boat. If I do that, I can now take this out, and it now contains my potassium iodate. The scale, we're not going to need the scale anymore, so if I right-click on that, I can just remove it from my work surface. The next thing we're going to need to do is get some glassware as well as some other solutions. Let's start by grabbing a volumetric flask. We're going to make a 100 milliliter solution, stock solution. So I'm going to grab this 100 milliliter volumetric flask and I'm going to place it on my work surface. The next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to transfer what I weighed out for the potassium iodate into that volumetric flask. Now, if I was doing this in a traditional chemistry laboratory, I would be using a funnel for this transfer, but this is a virtual space without that option, so I'm just going to add this right here, and then I can pour the mass that I need. And I'm going to go 0.0500. That's how much I want to add. And if we see that, we now have that piece right here, the potassium iodide, added to the volumetric flask. And you can also see that that mass of potassium iodide does have a volume, but I will warn you, when you're doing these virtual labs, you cannot rely on this volume and adding more water to get up to 100 milliliters. Okay, so that's not going to work every time. So instead, we're going to use the technique that we would use in a traditional chemistry lab to add distilled water to our volumetric flask until the meniscus reaches this mark that's on the flask. So let's go get to the stockroom and grab some distilled water. We'll add that to our work surface, and then what we're going to do is pour this into here. Now again, we would not be pouring an entire jug that is 3,000 milliliters into a volumetric flask. We would be usually using a smaller container, a squeeze bottle, or droplet device that we could add things in drop by drop. But once again, we're in a virtual lab, so we kind of have to go with what it provides us. So I'm going to drag this over to here. And you'll see from what I want right here, I want to have this piece right here going up to 100. And before, I believe it was something like 0.012 milliliters of that other stuff that we had, the potassium iodide. So let's just say if we add 99 milliliters and we pour that in, what we can see here is we can see this. Now we're at 99.012. So we're almost at that value of 100.00 milliliters. We need to add more water. So I'm going to drag this right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm trying to position this in a way that I can just see this value right here. So if I can see this, I can know how many more milliliters I need to add to get to perfectly 100 milliliters. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add at first 0.01 milliliters. And remember, what I'm doing is just adding water from this jug into my volumetric flask. Here is my meniscus level, and I'm wanting the bottom of this meniscus to be perfectly at that line. And once I've done that, I will be at 100 milliliters. So let's add this, and you can see this is a tedious progress, but if I keep on clicking, I'm adding more and more water. This value right here is going up, and I want that to eventually reach 100. So I'm still a ways away. I'm going to click rapidly, and once I get close to here, I'm really going to slow down. I'm watching the meniscus here, and it's almost at that line. I'm going to keep on adding that slowly, slowly, slowly until I eventually reach very close right now. Oh, one more click should do it. Perfect. You can see the meniscus of the solution is right at that line, and I've got 100.0 milliliters of water. Now I've created a solution of potassium iodide that is my required concentration if I use the right amount of mass, which you'll have to calculate, to produce that stock solution. This stock solution right here is what we're going to be using in our burette. Now what I'd like you to do is rename this solution to your first name as well as KiO3. That's our stock. I have to press the rename button, and what I'll do is that, and then I want you to take a screenshot of this. That way I know that you've done the lab, you've created your own stock solution, and that's what's needed for this first step.